Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to continue with my series of videos on science fiction movies of the 1980s, and today I'm going to talk about the 1984 film Iceman, which was directed by the Australian director Fred Skepsey, starred Timothy Hutton, Lindsay Krause, and John Lone. See, here is the poster right there. You can see that is John Lone, who played the Neanderthal in the film. And just to read the tagline for Iceman, he's 40,000 years old. Deep within an Arctic glacier, they found him, preserved by a miracle of nature, brought back to life by a miracle of science. Now medical science wants to exploit him in the name of research. One man wants to stop them in the name of humanity, but he'll need more than a miracle to survive. He'll need a friend. Iceman's a unique film in that it takes it approaches science fiction from an anthropological perspective, and I feel like that's kind of rare, especially with sci-fi movies. Maybe there's many documentaries about anthropology, but not a lot of movies that take that perspective. So I think there's a really cool premise and concept to this film that it raises a lot of great questions as you're watching it, and not in necessarily a cerebral way, but just kind of in a way where there's so much nonverbal acting in this movie where I think as the audience you're asking questions as you're watching it, which I think is really interesting about this movie, and makes it unique. So as I said there, as you heard in the tagline, just a little on the plot. So the movie starts out very much like The Thing, where we're at this Arctic research station, and they find this block of ice, and it's very mysterious when they find it, and you don't really know what's inside, and then they quickly discover that there is a human being encased in the ice, which they determined to be a Neanderthal, 40,000 years old, and they start to unthaw the ice. Of course, they assume the human being is dead, but they are able to revive this Neanderthal. I guess that's the science fiction part of it, where it's the cryogenic theory of if you freeze someone right before death, they can, you can revive them far in the future. So that's the idea here, and there's a scene in the film where scientists have this debate about cryogenics and the ethics of it. Like what if that was possible, where you could freeze someone and revive them years later. I mean, that's been part of the pop culture for a long time, but there is actually not like a goofy debate among scientists. They actually discuss it. Like this will probably be very expensive, probably something only the very privileged people can do. But anyway, that's just one example of how I think thoughtful the movie is in that scene where they're debating the ethics. And a lot of this movie is about the ethics of science and how using science as a tool to learn and inform ourselves, but what do you do when it starts to become more about exploitation? So anyway, they revive the Iceman, who they come to call Charlie. And I should say, John Lone's performance, I believe this was his debut film, and he is incredible as the Iceman in this movie. It's a mostly nonverbal performance, but he can speak in these kind of guttural tones and grunts, asking a lot of questions about what did early human beings even sound like? How did language evolve? I mean, clearly, like linguistics is another area I don't know much about, but starting out by just grunts were words at first, and then words start to get more complicated as you move along, and there are scenes with Timothy Hutton and John Lone where they are trying to communicate, and they're really good. They're really good. We're kind of with Timothy Hutton's perspective. He's the compassionate scientist trying to determine what John Lone is trying to express to him. Okay, but it's really good, kind of learning about verbal cues and how for the Neanderthal, touch is very important, feeling a need to touch everything. But there is this, and another great question the film gets into is what on earth would a prehistoric human being even make of a modern world, the modern world of technology? And it would be probably pretty terrifying, as the movie points out, where there are scenes where they try to keep him contained in this artificial environment, where like a mimicry of where he used to live, like a big environment where you would keep animals at a refuge, where he's able to hunt and able to climb trees and things like that. But at one point, he sees electricity, or he sees a helicopter in the sky, and absolutely freaks out, as one probably would. And even when he wakes up initially, we have a POV shot from his perspective, and he just has these doctors in mass standing over him. And once again, one could not imagine how frightening that would be. So that's really all handled well in the direction and the performances. The main conflict of the movie, well, the main conflict deals with what do they do with him, right? I mean, clearly, and the film never even really gets to the point of the idea of a Neanderthal man living a life in the modern world. I mean, the film never quite gets there. But clearly the scientists want to study him. They're already doing invasive medical experiments on him, which is clearly traumatized, as if the guy's not been through enough trauma already. He's being put through all these things. And the scientists' argument is that, well, we can learn so much about the origins of humanity by studying him as a test subject. And, Timothy Hutton is more on the side of, well, we need to connect with him. We need to be compassionate with him and try to give him the best life possible. So that's really the conflict. And of course, problems start out where at one point Charlie, as he's called, is able to escape, and he freaks out when he's seeing all this modern technology and ends up hurting himself and hurting others. And that scene just kind of shows us how unfit, how he couldn't even think of surviving in this world. So there's a real melancholy running through the movie, but also this sense of wonder at the same time. Now, they're able to determine that the Neanderthal died when he was on what they call a dream walk, where they assume that his tribe, a disease or something from the environment, was causing his tribe to die, and he was going on a quest to try to contact spiritual beings on a firewalk, and to hopefully bring back, so he could go back and help his people, is the idea. And there's a really moving scene where we learn that he had a family. He's talking about his wife and kids, and in this nonverbal way, and we get a sense of his deep sadness that he feels, and just how baffled he is at his existence at this point. So yeah, and that's really the conflict of the movie as it plays out. I think the first 2/3 of the movie are really, really good. It slows down a bit in the last third, where it becomes a little more action based, and I don't know, the story goes to a place, maybe it goes to a logical conclusion, I guess you could say, but I know, or you might be disappointed in the ending, but I'll leave that to you. But there's just so many great questions raised in the film about how language developed, about what it means to be human, what were early humans like. I think the idea that we are of the same species, you can have people of the same species, but just a human being from 5,000 years ago, could you even bridge that time gap between the two? A lot of fiction has dealt with that idea, but the film seems to be saying that any connection would be extremely difficult when you have two of the same species, you know, separated by so much time, right? Also raises questions about the way we live now in our modern civilization of technology, and just the idea that, not to get too philosophical, but the idea that humans used to live in nature and had to commune with nature all the time, a more, you know, existence connected more with nature. And that's, I think, a great question the film raises. I think the direction does a good job of juxtaposing. Like, there's a lot of scenes of people playing video games or on computers where the film does a lot to make us aware of how technological we are. And this is in 1984, and I think to contrast with what a Neanderthal would even think about technology. So once again, cool questions. Just a really lot of thoughtful questions the film raises. A great music score by Bruce Smeaton, I believe, who composed the score. It's a very kind of a haunting score, but it's also has a sense of wonder to it. The score is on YouTube, and that was very well done by Bruce Smeaton. And the film got good reviews when it came out. I went back and watched the old Siskel and Ebert review, and both of them really had great things to say about Iceman. And but it didn't do too well at the box office, and you know, that's why does a film fail? I don't know. Maybe I think some people might have thought this was a horror movie going by the trailer or something like that, or maybe the concept was too out there. I don't know, but I looked on Letterboxd, and not a lot of people have watched this movie. Only 3,000 people have logged it on Letterboxd, which is really low, especially for a movie from the 1980s, and that can be due to just lack of availability. With I think there was a DVD and Blu-ray release at different points for Iceman, but it is available to rent on most streaming platforms. You can rent this film and watch it, but I don't know. I don't remember it ever being on TV that much, and I don't know. It was just one of those movies that kind of came and went, and of course, I'm sure the people who went to see it in 1984 remembered it, and yeah. I was also thinking it would be an interesting movie for a remake. I think ripe for a remake. I think there's so many different directions you could go with this story, and I think a new filmmaker from today could really do some interesting, take the story into some interesting directions, especially how far technology has advanced since the 1980s, and how such a story would play out today. So it would be kind of cool if this was remade, and it was put out by Universal as well. I should mention. So I don't know. I wonder if anyone's ever considered doing another version of Iceman. So yeah, interesting film. A little bit obscure, but I think well worth watching. It's a unique movie. It's unique in a lot of ways, and thought-provoking as well. So those are my thoughts on Iceman. Thanks for watching.